The following news flash is brought to you by the Lone Star Lowdown, providing your daily bulletins for the commodities market. Today in history, news updates, and the inside scoop into the tides of the alternative. Markets for Wednesday, the 20th of April, 2016, are currently trading with gold at $1,253.14 an ounce, silver $17.14 an ounce, Texas crude $41.08 a barrel, and Bitcoin is currently at about 440 U.S. currency. Today in history, the year 1999. The Columbine High School shootings take place in Colorado. 13 people were killed, with 24 being injured. The Columbine shootings took place today in history. In recent news, Treasury Secretary Jack Lew is expected to announce later today that Harriet Tubman, the African-American abolitionist most famous for her role in helping slaves escape through the Underground Railroad, will soon be the new face on the $20 bill, with the U.S. founding father Alexander Hamilton remaining on the $10 paper note. The new $10 bill is set to be unveiled in 2020. The timing for the production of the new Harriet Tubman $20 bill, however, is yet to be announced. More than a dozen criminal charges have been filed today against 3 officials in Michigan as part of a months-long investigation into the lead-contaminated water crisis in Flint. The charges are the first from the government catastrophe, which has potentially exposed roughly 100,000 residents to lead-contaminated water. As a result of this, which many are calling criminal negligence, the crisis has led to an investigation of the possible links between the tainted water and a dozen deaths from Legionnaire's disease. In 2015, local, state, and federal authorities through the Drug Enforcement Administration's controversial cannabis eradication program uprooted roughly 4.1 million cultivated marijuana plants in all 50 states, as compared to the 4.3 million plants in 2014. While federal spending on the program has remained roughly the same at $18 million in the last few years, it tallies out to roughly $4.42 per plant. This DEA's program provides funding to 128 state and local law enforcement agencies to search for, seize, and destroy marijuana being grown across the country. Much of the money for the program comes from the Justice Department's highly controversial and constitutionally questionable asset forfeiture fund. However, at least 2 states have declined to accept federal eradication funds last year, Alaska and Colorado, where marijuana is now legal. 4 states, including even the District of Columbia, have legalized marijuana for adult use, with several other states hoping to follow smoke this year. With an ever-growing opposition from researchers, lawmakers, doctors, and the general public calling on the federal government to change course on marijuana policy and save us all some money. This is Rick Brody with your lowdown for 4/20/2016.
It's 11:59 at Radio Free America, and this is Uncle Sam with music and the truth until dawn. Right now, I got a few words for some of our brothers and sisters in the occupied zone. The chair is against the wall. The chair is against the wall. John has a long mustache. John has a long mustache. It's 12 o'clock, Americans, another day closer to victory. And for all of you out there on or behind the lines, this is your song.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome. I have a joke for you.
Okay.
The government in this town is excellent and uses your tax dollars efficiently.
You thought you'd see it coming. The moment you Bitcoin is immune from attack, or almost completely. With Bitcoin, you'll actually gain far more from using that computing power to generate Bitcoin.
There's a system approaching perfection. Just in time for it to disappear. There's a system approaching perfection. Just in time for it to disappear.
We'll walk deeper into the belly of the beast. If it means I'm able to further limit reckless government spending. I mean, I have so many ideas. Some are simple, like take down traffic lights and eliminate the post office. The bigger ones will be tougher, like bring all of this crumbling to the ground.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Crypto Show, a show about disruptive technology, currency, and liberty, with a pinch of sticking it to the man. As always, we come to you live from the real heart of the resistance in Austin, Texas, deep beneath the Chase Bank, with a stack of Bitcoin miners at our back, undermining the bank and the man. We bring to you the latest info from those hacking away at the digital revolution and having some fun while we do it.
Everything is awesome. Everything is cool when you're part of a team. Everything is awesome when we live in our dream.
You know, I can't tell you enough that is not the sound of hacking. That is the sound of, like, futuristic laser weapons. Pew, pew. That is still not the sound of hacking. Hacking implies, well, I guess it either sounds like a...
You're not saying lasers, right?
Lasers. Oh, God, we think too much alike. Soon I'm going to be watching Trailer Park Boys nonstop. Well, we're going to work on the hacking thing, because hacking either sounds like fast fingers on a keyboard or something sharp chopping at something. Until you get that, I don't know how you're going to help run the show with me. because you're too incompetent.
I'm sure I have a sound for that somewhere.
You probably do. All right. Well, welcome, guys, to the Crypto Show. Of course, it is Sunday, April 24th, 2016. And we are coming to the last week of cannabis legalization month here on the Crypto Show. Admittedly, we've been a little less focused on it this month as compared to last year, but we're still going to have a guest, I think, coming up the next week to discuss some legalization stuff. I think a returning guest, in fact.
What if we have Music Month?
Let's do it.
All right. I've already talked to Eric Tesmer. He's
I
coming.
want to do it. Let's also have like a Korean History Month. I don't know.
Where's my womp womp womp?
I don't know why I pulled that out of nowhere. But of course, we are still a crypto show, as the name implies, and a Bitcoin show.
Well, for Korean history, I have a Samsung phone.
Oh, that's good. I have an LG TV at home. So there, I win. Mine's a lot bigger than your phone. But of course, we're still a crypto show. So we're going to be talking about Bitcoin and related crypto stuff tonight. Our first guest, whom I will introduce shortly, is the founder of BitSquare, the world's first truly decentralized cryptocurrency exchange. And it's pretty exciting stuff. I saw a little interview he did with someone else online, and pretty excited to talk to him about this venture and what's in store for it. In the second hour, we've got Peter Todd, almost needs no introduction, Bitcoin developer, man of genius, and always a little contrarian or outside the box compared to a lot of the other people in the Bitcoin space. And that's what I like about him. And a very nice guy, and very good at breaking down the technical stuff for us of lower intellectual means. So we're excited to have him on. And smack dab in the middle, sandwiched in between these two gentlemen, we're going to have Zhao Tong, ZhouTonged, Zhao-Tong.com. He is, of course, as many of you know, not just one of the intro songs on the way back from break during one of our segments, but he is the master Bitcoin parodyist, taking popular songs and using his beautiful vocals and beautiful wordsmithing and creating a song about Bitcoin to that tune. So there's some announcements that he is going to make with us in the fourth segment, right before the second hour. So stay tuned for that. Pretty exciting stuff. And I want to mention, of course, Logos Radio Network is what brings us to you every day. Go to logosradionetwork.com and donate. And, of course, our sponsors, Brave New Books and Hill Country Home Improvements. And our new sponsor, Crypto Compare, who brings you every Sunday at the top of each hour the Crypto Compare Crypto News Minute. So I'm going to get into that before introducing our guest. All right, so Crypto Compare News Minute, Steam to accept Bitcoin. Valve is preparing to accept Bitcoin payments on Steam, according to developers and publishers who have been emailed the announcement. Although the third party managing the Bitcoin payments is not named, it is widely assumed to be BitPay. This announcement has had a positive effect on the Bitcoin price, as it is showing Bitcoin and digital currency's key synergy with the online gaming market. $4.50. Yeah, it's had a little bounce. Good for Bitcoin. We're excited to announce that Steam is going to start accepting payments via Bitcoin. We're using an external payment provider to process Bitcoin payments to help partners reach more customers on Steam. Bitcoin is becoming an increasingly popular online payment method in some countries, and we're enabling a system that insulates partners from risk and volatility while still providing value to the end customer. You do not need to take any action. If customers choose to pay via Bitcoin, they'll still be charged the price already set in the local currency. That's a quote, unattributed here, but I believe that's an excerpt from the email aforementioned. Swift developing distributed ledger. A report from Swift details their plans to develop a distributed ledger platform. The proposal is in partnership with Accenture and looks to incorporate blockchain identity and transaction settlement capability. The proof of concept will look to involve industry peers. And Bitstamp looking to secure European license. Bitstamp is reportedly near to closing a deal with the Luxembourg government to be able to set up operations across Europe. This follows on from Circle gaining provisions in the UK to be able to regulatory passport its operations across the Eurozone. I like how they're starting with like the smallest country in Europe. You got to start somewhere.
Well, they might as well start at Lieberland.
Yeah.
No one lives there.
Well, that then still makes it the smallest country.
Right.
All right, so that was the Crypto Compare News Minute. There's going to be another one at the beginning of the second hour, so stay tuned for that. Always a good way to find out what's happening right now in the Bitcoin ecosphere.
And speaking of other news, then the next guest, right? I mean, the decentralized exchange.
Yeah, and that's really pretty exciting news.
Surprised that's not part of the news minute yet.
See, but it's such a big thing that you can't fit it into a little blurb. That's why we're having him on as a guest. And as I said, the world's first truly decentralized cryptocurrency exchange, Manfred Carrere. He is the founder and lead developer of BitSquare. You go to their website, bitsquare.io. Manfred, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Thanks a lot for inviting me to your show. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's an honor to be on the same show with Peter Todd, one of my favorite developers.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think just about everyone's a big fan of his, and we're always pleased that he's willing to come on the show.
I have to beg him sometimes, but yeah.
But he still does it. But we're also very pleased to have you on the show. This is quite an exciting thing that you've started and created, and so we'll get into that. But tell us first, Manfred, a little bit about yourself and your background.
Yeah, I'm a software developer since more or less 15 years. I was a musician before, and I got into Bitcoin more as I heard first about Bitcoin in 2011 and get very excited immediately. And for me, the most important stuff what I saw in Bitcoin was this political potential to really change the political power structures, first from the banks and then also from the governments, because when the governments don't have the control over the money anymore, the issuance of the money and the control over the flow of the money, they have to redefine their existence and their identity. And I think that's a very strong, has a lot of potential, even more like the internet maybe. And I was hoping to find a way how I can become active in the Bitcoin space. And it needed a few years until 2014, until I really started to do something. And I was investigating how the problem to build a decentralized fiat exchange, as a crypto to fiat exchange, if it's possible to build it. And I designed a concept, was discussing it with people and built a prototype and was going on to developing. And now finally we have the beta launch this Wednesday. And that's basically, in short, the story.
And that's really exciting, the beta launch. I know, though, however, that there have already been dozens, if not hundreds, of transactions on the exchange. I do want to add, too, I like how you mentioned that one of your motivators in getting into the Bitcoin space was political, ideological. And, of course, that's pretty common. But you talk about how governments have to redefine their existence or even redefine themselves out of existence. And something decentralized and peer-to-peer and uncensorable and non-centrally controlled like Bitcoin and related technologies is a big part of that. But on the second layer of that, things like Bitcoin exchanges, Bitcoin wallets, and other platforms also need to be free from censorship and centralized control and also need to be decentralized. So that's why this is such a powerful next step, not just in the usability of Bitcoin, but in keeping Bitcoin and finances even further away from government control. So I definitely applaud you on that. Anyway, so tell us then, what is BitSquare? Let's get into that.
Yeah, BitSquare is a decentralized Bitcoin exchange, and especially for fiat money, also you can exchange any national currency like US dollar or euro or whatever to Bitcoin, as well as altcoins to Bitcoin. So we are supporting basically any altcoin which are fulfilling our minimum requirements. And it works basically on top of the features of Bitcoin, also mainly the as a multisig address where the funds are locked up during the trade process. And it uses a peer-to-peer, a custom peer-to-peer network, which utilizes Tor hidden services. So you get all the privacy from Tor for free. But no worry, the users don't need to set up or install anything. It's all integrated in BitSquare. And it uses a custom peer-to-peer network, which is basically following a similar architecture like the Bitcoin peer-to-peer network. So it's a flat field algorithm, and I think it's the combination with Tor. I think it makes the peer-to-peer network quite strong, and that's basically the backbone of the application and probably the most difficult part to build a really decentralized application. What else? Yeah, it's completely open source, so it says a GPL license. And BitSquare also takes the decentralization part not only on the infrastructure, but it applies also on the organizational structure. So BitSquare is not a company, it's not a startup. There are no investors behind. It's self-funded by my savings and my work and from community donations. And we are planning now to build a DAO, as a decentralized autonomous organization. That's still not implemented, but it's on the roadmap. So for the next months, we are planning to build this, and that should be a way to find new funding models at the end for such applications. Because, of course, to scale it with the current situation, I'm limited with.
All right, we're coming to break. Sorry to interrupt. Manfred Carrere of BitSquare. We'll be right back to talk about more of it.
You are listening to the Logos Radio Network. LogosRadioNetwork.com.
This is what happens when you call the cops. Say what? This is what happens when you call the cops. Come on. This is what happens when you call the cops. You get your rights violated or you all get shot. This is what happens when you call the cops. This is what happens when you call the cops. This is what happens when you call the cops. You get your rights violated or you all get shot. I'm sick of people being
This is what happens when you use a digital.
Decentralized exchange.
Wow, you ruined that one. Good job.
There you go.
All right, just we'll take that. We'll edit that out of the recording later. I'm sorry if you had to hear that live, but
I probably will.
I'm just kidding. Welcome back, though, to the Crypto Show. It's your hosts, Chris and Danny. It is April 24th, 2016, a Sunday. Don't forget, we come to you, as always, on Logos Radio Network. And our sponsors, never forget them either, Brave New Books, Hill Country Home Improvements, and Crypto Compare with the Crypto Compare News Minute twice every Sunday on the Crypto Show.
And most importantly, Carl's
Jr. Duh. I mean, you can hear me eating in the background. You know that's Carl's Jr. But we are.
I'm still cracking up about Tatiana thinking that was a real thing.
I know. I was shocked that she took that seriously. But I would love if they did sponsor us. That would be great. Free burgers for life. Well, we're talking with our guest, Manfred Carrere, creator and lead developer for BitSquare, the world's first truly decentralized cryptocurrency exchange. And Manfred, Danny had a really good question during the break that I want to ask you now that we're back on air. What cryptocurrencies, what altcoins besides Bitcoin do you accept, and how many do you accept? And are there minimum criteria necessary for an altcoin to get onto BitSquare?
Yeah. At the moment, we are supporting more or less 30 altcoins. So of course, all the relevant, all the top 10, top 20 altcoins from the market capitalization. But we are very free and very neutral to adding other altcoins. So it's not an endorsement when we add an altcoin. We just don't want to become gatekeepers and make resource control. We just want to avoid that we get filled up with hundreds or thousands of altcoins which nobody uses, because it's at the end it lacks on. It's a disadvantage for usability for all the users when you have a list of thousands of altcoins and have to select your favorite coin. And we when we see that the altcoin is a clear scam coin, of course we don't accept it and we kick it out. But the criteria to get added is that the altcoin is actively maintained, that they have a block explorer, of course, and that they are adding BitSquare as an official exchange on their webpage, and that they are providing us the basic information like the ticker symbol, the official name, the format of their address. So we can do input validation for the addresses. That's at the moment not implemented, but it's on the roadmap for the next months. And that's it, basically. So it's very low entry barrier. It's basically to avoid that we get spammed with hundreds of coins with actually nobody using, or they're nearly dead, or they're not maintained anymore. But as I said, it's not an endorsement. Many of the altcoins I really don't know, but we don't want to be gatekeepers of BitSquare to limit this resource. We want to provide it free to anybody who wants to use it.
Yeah, I like that. You stay neutral, and the way you put it during the break is you kind of let the free market decide. And I think that's the best way to go about it. Keeping the bare minimum off of scams and spam, I think, is legitimate, because it leaves the door open for new cryptocurrencies that could prove to be viable in the long term. Or
except for Clubcoin, that one sucks. Just kidding.
Except for I'm definitely.
No, I'm not kidding.
But yeah, you never know what a cryptocurrency could come along and add some new feature that might be useful to the market. And I think, as you also mentioned off air, even if cryptocurrencies that are available on the exchange fail, they can teach us through their failure. Dogecoin, as you mentioned, taught us that a cryptocurrency can be used as a sort of social means for tipping or whatnot. So that's really cool. I mean, 30 cryptocurrencies, that's quite a lot. That's a good span there. And I guess let's get into trading. I guess explain that a little more in detail. Take us step by step through how trading works and how long transactions take.
Yeah. So when a user starts, he downloads the application. The only thing, when he starts trading, he needs to set up his payment method. That's normally a bank account or a payment processor like Perfect Money or OKPay. Or in case of an altcoin, he just need to add the altcoin address. And of course, this data are just locally stored on his client. BitSquare never has access to this data, so that's completely private on the user's machine. And he has the chance he has the option to create an offer. He want to buy, for instance, one Bitcoin for $450 or whatever, and he posts this offer to the network, and then every other user receives this offer, and it gets displayed in the public offer book. You can filter this offer book by currency, by payment methods, and so on. And another user who likes to take this offer, he just clicks take offer, and then he can he can decide. So you can, when you create an offer, you can define a range of the amount. Maybe you say, okay, I want to buy between half Bitcoin and 1 Bitcoin. So you give a little bit more flexibility to the other trader, and then the other trader can define inside of this range how much Bitcoin he wants to sell. And then he's taking the offer, and this point, when he's taking the offer, then the multisig is created between the two traders. That's it's a protocol. It's all end-to-end encrypted, and it's only communication between the two traders. So there's no central server or whatever. Over the peer-to-peer network, the two traders get connected, and they're exchanging the messages to build this multisig transaction. And then from this moment, the funds are locked. So funds, because the buyer, when you're buying Bitcoin, you also need to lock up a small amount, a security deposit that's needed, that you're following the trade protocol. Because otherwise, when you're a buyer and somebody's taking your offer, then your next step would be that you have to pay the fiat, the national currency, to the seller. And when you have nothing to lose, you just could forget about this trade, and then the other seller has all the problems to get his money out from this multisig. And to avoid this, both have to put up a small security deposit that stays in your local wallet until the trade gets started and everything gets into this multisig, and then everything is locked up in the multisig, because the coins are never leaving actually your wallet. They're either on your wallet locally or locked up in this multisig, and the key holder for the multisig are the two traders and an arbitrator. And the arbitrator, it's a decentralized arbitration system where basically anybody can become an arbitrator. They need to lock up a high security deposit, that's something like 5 Bitcoin or so, that's needed to avoid collusion, so the arbitrator cannot make a scam with one trader and scam the other trader. And the arbitrator is only needed in case of problems, when the buyer, for instance, not making the fiat transfer after the trade period, which is dependent on the payment method. For banks, we have 8 days. For altcoins or for payment processors which have instant transfer, it's 1 day. So after this 1 day, for instance, when the seller has not received the fiat payment, he can call the arbitrator. The arbitrator will investigate the case, get in contact with both, and find out who was not following the trade protocol correctly. And the loser will lose then his security deposit to the arbitrator. So the security deposit is an important part of the security concept of BitSquare, that both are following the protocol. And we're assuming that everything went fine, at the end, when the seller has received the fiat payment from the buyer, he confirms this on the BitSquare application, and both traders are creating, also the application is creating for both traders the payout transaction from the security deposit, and then the buyer gets his Bitcoin, and both get back their security deposit. And the fiat transfer is always, and the altcoin transfer is always outside of the system of BitSquare. So you go to your banking webpage, do the transaction. It's basically like in local Bitcoin. And with the altcoin, you go to your altcoin wallet, make the transaction, and then when you see it, it's visible on the Block Explorer. You confirm it in BitSquare. I've done the payment, and the other has the chance to check it. When he sees it also on the Block Explorer, he confirms I've received it, and that's it, and the trade is done. And the time depends. Also, the buyer has to wait at least one blockchain confirmation to avoid double spend, and that's the minimum time of the trade. That can be a few seconds when you have luck, and you get quickly a block. And in average, it's 10 minutes. Of course, when you have bad luck and there's a lot, the miners are lazy with their work, it can take up also half an hour or whatever. And the other factor.
Okay, well, we're actually coming to break. I hate to interrupt, but really interesting way how it works. We'll have some other questions and answers on the other side. So stay tuned. Manfred Carrere, BitSquare. We'll be right back.
Are you worried your shyness might hold you back in the business world? I'm Dr. Catherine Albrecht, back to reassure you that introverts can indeed climb to the top of the ladder while still avoiding the limelight right after this.
Privacy is under attack. When you give up data about yourself, you'll never get it back again. And once your privacy is gone, you'll find your freedoms will start to vanish too. So protect your rights, say no to surveillance, and keep your information to yourself. Privacy, it's worth hanging on to. This message is brought to you by StartPage.com, the private search engine alternative to Google, Yahoo, and Bing. Start over with StartPage.
Given the media prominence of guys like Larry Ellison and Richard Branson, it's easy to assume that all successful people are charismatic extroverts. But recent research has found that's not the case. In fact, introverts do better than extroverts by a ratio of 4-to-1 and more often leave positive legacies. That's because introverts focus on one goal at a time rather than scattering their energies. They value teamwork more than ego. They're not threatened by high-performing colleagues, and precisely because they're not in the limelight, they find it easier to admit their mistakes and change course when needed. So I guess the old saying is true. Still waters really do run deep. I'm Dr. Catherine Albrecht for StartPage.com, the world's most private search engine.
You are listening to the Logos Radio Network. LogosRadioNetwork.com.
What's your plan for tomorrow? Are you a leader or will you follow? Are you a fighter or will you cower? It's our time. Take back the power. What's your plan for tomorrow? Are you a leader or will you follow? Are you a fighter or will you cower? It's our time. Take back the power. What you gonna do when they show up in black suits on your street and I mid boots and then silence you? What you gonna say?
All right, guys, welcome back to the Crypto Show here on this lovely Sunday, April 24th, 2016, here on Logos Radio Network, brought to you by our sponsors, Brave New Books at bravenewbookstore.com and the bitcoinbookstore.com, Hill Country Home Improvements, and, of course, Crypto Compare with the Crypto Compare News Minute at the top of each hour every Sunday show. And we're talking with Manfred Carrere, founder and lead developer of BitSquare, the world's first truly decentralized cryptocurrency exchange. And he just did a very thorough and very clear, I thought, explanation of how it works. And just to kind of summarize, so basically it's set up kind of like local Bitcoins, correct? As far as the posting of trades and whatnot?
Yeah, I think local Bitcoin is probably similar in the way how the trade works, but the main difference is that BitSquare is completely decentralized and is not holding the user's data and holding not holding the user's fund, and with that avoiding all the problems with the hacks and with all these issues.
Right, and you know, I like that security deposit measure to prevent users from basically screwing the other end of the transaction with the transaction fee, because if they just break the deal, well, then they get put with the transaction fee. And of course, it also does the security deposit also prevent chargebacks? Did you mention that?
The chargeback risk is basically prevented that we are not supporting payment methods where you can easily make a chargeback like PayPal. And at least in Europe with SEPA, it's very hard to make chargeback. There is a tiny risk open for criminal activities. So when somebody is using a stolen bank account, then probably you get a chargeback. And the main protection against this is that we have a limit on the trade amount. So at the moment, it's half a Bitcoin for bank transfers. For other stuff, it's 1 Bitcoin. And later it will be probably also not more than 1 Bitcoin or maybe 2 Bitcoin. And with that, we hope it's sufficient prevention, sufficient means to not attract these criminals who want to cash out the stolen bank accounts incomplete with thousands of euro and not with a few hundred of euro. And when that does not, when we find out that there's too much problems with that, we have other features like time-locked payout transaction or additional features which are a little bit too complex to get into the details. But we hope that we are getting not really big problems with that.
All right. And in a moment, I want to ask you a couple questions about security and privacy at BitSquare. But before I do, I want to get a couple other questions out of the way before I forget. So just to clarify, there are fees involved in each exchange, right? But I recall you saying in another interview, they're pretty nominal fees, like close to the same as mining fees. Is that correct?
Yeah, at the moment we keep the fees nearly to zero. So the create offer fee, when you're creating an offer, it's more or less 2 times the mining fee. And when you're taking an offer, it's a little bit more, but it's also, in a few dollar cents or very, very little. But of course, later we will adopt the fees to the market. But the height of the fees will be determined by voting by the shareholders of this decentralized autonomous organization. So what the shareholders think should be the fee, that will be the fee at the end. But it will be in below their competitors.
Yeah, it sounds like a very negligible fee. And then it sounds like, too, just to clarify, Bitcoin has to be on one end of any transaction, right? It either has to be Bitcoin to fiat or vice versa, or Bitcoin to other altcoin?
Yeah, exactly, because we're using this multisig, and for this Bitcoin is needed. And it's more a practical reason, because theoretically you could build it on Ethereum or whatever, but it would be a lot of effort. The only coin where it would make sense, and what I would consider maybe someday, would be to use Monero as the main currency because of the privacy features of Monero. But that would be a lot of effort, and it's not planned for the next half year at least. We have a lot of other sub-projects planned, like CoinJoin and this DIO, and it takes a lot of effort to implement all this stuff.
Gotcha. Well, one step at a time. All right. Well, I remember you mentioned too in another interview how BitSquare is basically unregulated. You approached lawyers, you approached regulators here and abroad, and because you don't handle funds and because of the decentralized nature of the exchange, you weren't required to do KYC or others of these onerous regulations, which is great. I mean, I'm all for a market-regulated free market and the government staying out. But but kind of along those lines too, how do we know that the funds aren't held by BitSquare, but how do we know that the funds are secure, and how do we know that the user's privacy is kept intact?
Yeah, so everything is open source. So everybody who is able to read the code and to understand the code can verify everything. And the application. You can check that all the connections are only to this peer-to-peer network. In BitSquare, there are basically only two types of data. Either they are completely public, like the offer, so anybody can read it. It's like the blockchain in Bitcoin, so it's completely public to everybody, and anybody can make their statistics and analysis with that data. Or it's completely private. That's this trade exchanges between the traders. That's end-to-end encrypted over Tor, so nobody can intercept this data. And with Tor, we also have the protection about the metadata for the user. So the IP address does not exist in this system. It's only this Tor onion address, and you get probably the best privacy what you can get at the moment with Tor. And the protection of privacy is basically the main focus for me with BitSquare, because I think the main problem with the Bitcoin exchanges, for me, it's not the security problems. I mean, of course, that's a big problem as well. But the main problem for me is that these exchanges are collecting the data of the user, the real life identities, and then connect this data to the Bitcoin addresses. And with coin tracing and analysis of the flow of these coins, they get quite a lot of information. And as the part what you probably have in the second part of your show with Chain
Peter Todd.
Yeah.
I was just going to say we're going to talk about that very subject in the second part of the show.
This stuff is real. These problems are real. It's not conspiracy theories. So we know that there are quite a lot of companies working on such stuff, and that would basically turn Bitcoin in a dystopian version. It's completely the opposite of that what Bitcoin was created for. When we have a Bitcoin which is completely under total surveillance, nobody should use it, and I would be the first who would abandon it. And it would not survive. Nobody would use it, and another altcoin or another solution will step in. So basically those exchanges who are going very much in that direction. I don't want to name it, but that probably many people know who is meant. They're not working for Bitcoin. They are working maybe for the investors or whatever, but they are attacking the very basic principles of Bitcoin, that it's fungible, so that any coin has the same value like any other coin, and that when you receive a coin, you don't have the obligation to investigate the history of the coin, because it would add too much cost and too much complexity. So it would be a bad money, and nobody would like to use a bad money. The US dollar would be better money like such a Bitcoin. And I think
I know, sad thing to say, but absolutely true, and it's a real concern. And I'm glad Manfred Creer and Peter Todd and others are willing to say that, because for a long time people were too Pollyannish about these possibilities. Well, we have a minute and 20 seconds left. I hate to interrupt, but it's been a great talk with Manfred Creer, founder and lead developer of BitSquare, the world's first truly decentralized cryptocurrency exchange. Manfred, tell us how people can learn more. Tell us again the date for the beta launch and anything else in the next minute.
Yeah, on our webpage, bitsquare.io, they can find all information, like the white paper, the download for the application. We have now a forum where people already get very active, and where you can find support when you have questions. We have all other kind of channels like IRC or subreddit, mailing list, whatever, the usual stuff. And please get in touch with us. You can read also more about this decentralized autonomous organization, which is not in place yet, but people can get an idea what's planned. And it's a community project. It should be developed and run by the community. It's not a startup. It has, we try to find a new way as a funding model also, how to scale such a project, how to make it a success for a global exchange.
I think it will be very successful. Manfred Creer of BitSquare, bitsquare.io. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Yes, thanks a lot for having me here.
Easy.
Waiting for the winds of change to sweep the clouds away.
All right, guys, welcome back to the Crypto Show. Again, it is Sunday, April 24th, 2016, here on Logos Radio Network. Brought to you, as always, by our sponsors, Brave New Books, Hill Country Home Improvements, and Crypto Compare, with the Crypto News Minute at the top of each hour every Sunday. Well, we were just talking with Manfred Carrere, founder and lead developer of BitSquare, the world's first truly decentralized cryptocurrency exchange. And quite an interesting topic. Of course, this was kind of inevitable. There are already exchanges out there, centralized exchanges, but some with relative degrees of decentralization. But this is the first truly decentralized. In fact, he goes through on the website explaining how he defines decentralized step by step, what characterizes a truly decentralized exchange. And fascinating stuff. He's really good at explaining it. It's definitely a lot of information, but just rewind that segment if it was a little bit too much for you, and you'll get it the second time around, I think. But of course, if you're already familiar with Bitcoin and so many of the applications there, whether for exchanging or for everything else, probably a lot of it, like multi-sig and everything else, is familiar to you. So it's just a recombination of familiar elements. Well, Manfred Carrere, BitSquare, bitsquare.io. There's a blog and a forum. Check that out. The beta launch is this Wednesday, April 27th, but there are already successful offerings and transactions. I believe he said 250 offers and 40 trades have already happened. So it's functional, but a lot of people will probably wait for that beta.
Even though it still doesn't support Hashcoin.
I can't believe he left that out. He was acting all open-minded. We'll take any altcoin as long as it's not spam, but no Hashcoin.
Right.
Since when was spam a worthless, since when was Hashcoin a worthless spam coin? Come on. Not just anybody can make Hashcoin.
And don't confuse the physical Hashcoins with the digital ones. Well, there are both.
Of course not. Of course not. Well, don't confuse our next guest with the rock stars that he emulates in his Bitcoin parody songs, because it's easy to do that considering his vocal talents. You'd think it was Billy Joel, or you'd think it was any of the number of... Exactly. You think it's Billy Joel, but then you start hearing Billy Joel talk about Bitcoin, and then you realize, no, it's not Billy Joel. It's Zhou Tong, ZHOUTONGED. I just love the flow of spelling it out. ZHOU-TONGED.com. He is a vocalist and lyricist, dare I say a poet, a Bitcoin parodyist who takes popular songs by popular singers and songwriters and turns them into Bitcoin-themed songs of his own. And he's here with us on the line. Zhou Tong, can you hear me?
Yeah. Hey, what's going on, guys?
Not much. Great to have you back. You're sounding a little distant. Danny's, I think, adjusting for that. But thanks for being back on the show, man.
I'm good, man. Yeah. Good to hear from you guys, man. And hello to Peter. Hope all is well. Good to see you on the show. Yeah, I'm good, man. I actually was calling to say hello, and I wanted to mention to the fellow Bitcoiners around that are listening about something that I actually put together and thought I'd let everybody know.
Ooh, exciting!
I'm actually not pushing it. Actual promotion won't actually start till tomorrow. If anybody hearing it today is kind of hearing it a day early.
Only on the
but basically, decided, the weather's getting nice. It's a good time of the year. You got the convention going on next week, May 2nd to the 4th, over here, the Consensus 2016 here in New York City. And I thought, man, why not? With everything going on at the convention, why not? Put something little together, more on the relaxed side of things, just to have a good time with everybody, a good networking event. So I'm throwing a party May 2nd at the Means Fiddler on 47th and 8th, 266 47th and 8th. It's 3 blocks from the convention. From the Marriott Marquis, actually. I'm starting the party at 8 o'clock till about 1. I have a DJ for the night. We're gonna do some we're gonna have some games. We're gonna do a raffle. I'm raffling off a Capacious coin. Actually, for some fun.
What is it?
A Capacious coin with a Bitcoin that carries a coin that's from one of the older blocks.
Cool.
We're talking about like a coin from 2012.
Wow, it's ancient.
So we're gonna have some fun. Also, along with that, of course, I'll jump on and do something, do a little show. But I also called a friend of mine, and for the first time, we've never done this before. She's a really good friend of mine. Tatiana Moros is also joining me. We're actually throwing this together. She'll also be there. We are doing with the games and the stuff that we're doing. The proceeds portions of the proceeds will be going to help Ross Ulbricht.
Awesome. That's great of you.
And his defense team and helping with that. We want to try to do whatever we can do to to help with his situation. So we're gonna have a good time. We're gonna have some fun. She's gonna perform for a bit. I'll perform for a bit. But it's really more about just having a good time and having just a laid back kind of like loosen the tie, kick your shoes off. We're gonna have some cool stuff going on. Just come out and have a good time. We've never done it before. It's kind of like doing like a meetups times 10 thing, like if meetups was on steroids kind of thing, where all the Bitcoiners in New York City, along with everybody globally that will be in town, like come on down, let's have some fun. Definitely, we'll have a good time.
Why isn't John Barrett part of this yet? Why isn't he up there singing "Ode to Satoshi" or something?
I'm sorry?
I said, why isn't John Barrett from Bitcoins and Gravy not a part of this yet? Shouldn't he be singing "Ode to Satoshi"?
This is really just something that I'm putting together. I've never really done it before. This is really just with the fact that everybody being in town and just with the New Yorkers being around. Tatiana and I had always discussed wanting to do a show together, and I thought, well, why don't we do something? So I thought, we're throwing this. So basically, what it is, it's just a pop-up kind of fun event. All are welcome, and I thought, it'd be fun for both of us to jump on stage and do some stuff, and so we'll do that, and just kind of have a good time. I got it set up. We'll be really pushing it tomorrow. So you'll see the flyer will be posted out and everything. We'll all tweet it. She'll be tweeting it. I'll be tweeting it.
Well, we'll be pushing it too. I'm pretty excited. I'm really excited about this, except for the fact that I don't think Danny and I can go. I would love, we went to New York for the New York City Liberty Fest this past year, and it was our first time in New York. We had a blast. I mean, I would love to go, but it's not in the cards. I'm actually going to be out of the country even the week after this. So, but man, anyone who can go, you should. This sounds exciting. And what is the convention again that's connected to it?
So there is connected with CoinDesk. They are running this Consensus 2016 for 2 days, from the 2nd to the 4th. And a lot of people are, coming into town for that. But I think with them being in town is a good thing and fun. But we just happen to be, the fact that they're in town is a good thing. But we wanted to do something anyway. Just so happened that we could line it up with the space and everything that I was able to get with it being around that date. So,
we'll do our best to promote it, not just because we want to promote a cool event by you guys, but because if the more people can go and have fun and might be inclined to donate to Ross, well, that's all the better for him. So we will definitely push this on the Crypto Show. I just wish that, you're a big name performer in crypto and Bitcoin. I wish you had gotten someone better known than this. What was her name again?
What was that?
What was the name of the other performer with you? It started with a T. Oh, Tatiana Moroz. That's right. I'm kidding. I was trying to make her.
We're busting her chops.
Moroz.
Yeah, we're busting her chops.
Right, so Tatiana, she travels everywhere. She's great. I'm a fan. She's global. She really does travel and is a part of a lot.
No, she is.
You can look.
Yeah, we've had her on a few times.
Yeah. For anybody who doesn't know her, look her up, TatianaMoroz.com. That was the other thing, is that she's traveling. She travels so much that it just so happened that she was in town, and we've been discussing things for a little bit, just on some collaborating in the future down the line.
Ooh, that sounds exciting.
And just for fun, possibly. We'll see. These are things that why not? She's great, and we're really cool, and I support a lot of what she's doing and her movement, and so I thought, why not, with her being in town? Let's have some fun.
I think this is going to.
The weather is getting nice here in New York City. I know that the Bitcoin community in New York City is huge.
It is. And
I thought
we're coming to break with Zhao Tong. Sorry to interrupt, but we'll be right back on the other side, guys.
Yeah. No. Thank you.
Can't be trusted. Can't be trusted. Can't be trusted.
All right, guys, welcome back to the second hour of the Crypto Show here on Logos Radio Network. Brought to you, as always, by our sponsors, Brave New Books and Hill Country Home Improvements. And let's not forget our third sponsor, a new one to the show, Crypto Compare. And speaking of which, it's time for, boys and girls, I want that thing, that sound in the back where it's like, do-do-do-do-do-do. Time for our Bitcoin News Minute, brought to you by Crypto Compare. All right. Well, Bitstamp looking to secure a European license. Actually, we already mentioned that in the first hour, but I'm going to bring it up again. Bitstamp is reportedly near to closing a deal with the Luxembourg government to be able to set up operations across Europe. This follows on from Circle gaining provisions in the UK to be able to bring its passport operations across the Eurozone. Korean broker tie-up with local Bitcoin exchange. The Korean securities broker Daishin, hopefully I pronounced that right, Daishin, have signed a deal with CoinOne, a Seoul-based Bitcoin exchange. Daishin clients can now use Bitcoins as a deposit option for the broker. The agreement signed between the two parties also looks towards building blockchain applications for stock services. Bitcoin CPU and GPU malware uncovered. PWO bot is a Python-written malware that mines via victims' CPUs and GPUs, whilst also acting as a keylogger. Although the software seems to be Polish in origin, it has been spreading further afield of late, affecting Danish and French companies. All right, as always, the Crypto Compare News Minute wouldn't be complete without some price moves. Bitcoin has had a positive week with prices pushing through the psychologically significant $450 barrier to highs of $455, a 5.3% move. Not bad. The combination of a stamp of approval from Steam as well as the release of SegWitness code means some of uncertainty is being removed from Bitcoin's outlook. Ethereum, in comparison, has had a poor week with the price off 14% against the dollar and 17% against Bitcoin. Although there's no discernible reason for the price moves, Ether is out of vogue for the time being. Well, it's funny to say there's no discernible reason, and then they're out of vogue.
Did they look in the ether for it?
Am I right? Probably that's just profit taking, if nothing else. I imagine with a huge climb in the price. I don't know. I'm just guessing at that. But that was another Crypto Compare News Minute, and we appreciate their involvement here at the Crypto Show. Well, we're going to get to our next guest here in a moment. And actually, we also have another guest in studio as well, whom I will announce. I just want to recap, though. Our first two guests were Manfred Carrere, founder and lead developer of BitSquare, the world's first truly decentralized cryptocurrency exchange. Go to bitsquare.io to learn more about that and their beta launch on Wednesday, April 27th. Pretty interesting guy. Sounds really legit. And hopefully it will be a very successful venture, because that's where Bitcoin exchanges have been heading. Is everything is decentralizing. They're heading in that direction, and that's the whole point. It's not just enough to have Bitcoin be.
I thought it was just a catchphrase.
It's more than that. It's not just enough for Bitcoin to be decentralized or censorship resistant. Other applications on top of it, like exchanges, really need to go in that direction as well. We also had Zhao Tong, ZHOU-TONGED.com is his website. Bitcoin parodyist. He takes popular songs and rewrites them to be Bitcoin themed and sings them. And he's an incredible vocalist, incredible lyricist, great all around wonderful guy, and fun guy as well. And he is going to be throwing a shindig during the what was the convention again?
Coin Census.
Coin Census. Thank you. I kept thinking Consensus. So we'll post more information about that.
It's a status glory party. No way. I'm just kidding.
I had something past glory in my head, but we'll promote that further in the time to come. That's going to be on May 2nd in the evening after the Coinvention conference, and we'll give further details about.
You're going to have a bad time.
About when and where as well. Not if you go to that party with Zhao Tong, and of course Tatiana Morosa is going to be there. And I just want to reiterate that he hinted that he and Tatiana might be collaborating in the near future. So we'll find out more about that. That would be a pretty awesome thing. Well, we're getting to our next guests. One in studio and one on the line. Neither of them need an introduction, but I'll give it anyway. In studio is Brian Deary, chief scientist of Factom, who took up my offer to come on the show, and I appreciate it. What is chief scientist anyway?
Oh, Peter? Peter Todd also has a good explanation, since he was the chief scientist of Mastercoin as well.
Oh, that's a good point. Well, I'm going to call myself chief scientist of the crypto show.
Are there any lasers?
That's a good idea.
Well, speaking of another scientifically minded person, yes, Peter Todd is also on the line. We're always excited to have him on. Bitcoin developer, all-around brilliant guy, and always someone who offers food for thought. Often a contrarian or at least alternative perspective on Bitcoin-related matters, and that's why we love to have him on the show.
Allow myself to introduce myself.
And of course, he and Brian Deary are both good at explaining difficult technical topics in layman's terms that we can understand. So we appreciate that. Peter, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thanks for having me on.
No problem. Thanks for being patient during that long intro. Well, Peter, we're having you on due to this sort of revelation that you have kind of brought to the Bitcoin community's attention. Tell us about that. So it's called Chain Anchor, and give us a rundown on all that. Let's get into that.
Well, I mean, it's a bit hard to know what's going on exactly, but what I wrote up in my blog and what's certainly plausible is that essentially the idea with Chain Anchor is you use sort of a combination of zero knowledge crypto and so on to basically make what's kind of like this anonymous whitelist. And the idea is that people can register their identity. They'll give in their real world identity, register it. They get back this crypto token, you can kind of call it. And the point is then they can go associate that with their Bitcoin addresses in such a way that it's supposed to be anonymous. So you can kind of say, all right, I've registered my identity. I'm AML compliant. If I do bad things, I can be tracked down, but otherwise people won't know who I am. And the idea there is, essentially standard AML compliance stuff, know your customer and all this, be able to transact with that. Now, if this was being on a permission chain, something exterior to Bitcoin, I don't think anyone would really care that much. But what's ugly about it is their paper. And, I found this in a draft of their paper. They're talking about implementing this on the Bitcoin blockchain. And they want to do some weird stuff. I mean, they're saying in the draft paper that, they would go pay miners to only mine blocks containing these permission transactions. So if you, are a miner who signs up, you give up your identity, you de-anonymize yourself to this thing, you register, and then you get paid for every block you create that only contains these transactions. Well, of course, what's this going to do to Bitcoin if a lot of miners sign up? If you want to transact without registering your identity, it's going to take you longer, it's going to cost more, so on and so forth. And additionally, and this is where things get a little more fuzzy and it's not really clear what's real or not, it sounded like there was a plan to eventually push non-compliant, non-registered miners out of Bitcoin entirely. And of course, here's where things get tricky for me. I mean, I've had people privately go tell me, that yes, Chain Anchor is actually trying to do this and so on. This isn't just an academic paper, this is an actual thing. But, if I can't get people to go on record, I mean, what evidence do I have? So with my blog posts I recently put up, I decided, you know what, I'm just going to put down what I know, release the leaked draft of the paper that's been given to me by a couple people who are concerned, and, let the community decide what they think this actually means. The Chain Anchor guys... No, you go on.
Sorry to interrupt, but the draft of the paper that you've released undoubtedly exists. I mean, that's not in dispute that this paper has been written and that this idea has been proposed, right?
Exactly, yeah.
It's just a question of...
very clear.
It's just a question of what's the intention behind it.
So I did read that paper, and it all seemed pretty banal stuff. It all seemed like stuff that the cypherpunks of the 90s were dreaming about, where you have this identity, which if you wanted to prove your identity to someone else or prove that you were of some age, you would just show them one cryptographic proof, and that would be validatable without showing them your water bill and your passport and everything else.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. Like, that technology certainly has some potential good uses. The problem is, when you're trying to go force people to go use this, when you're trying to coerce miners to only mine transactions that sign up on this, this is taking Bitcoin from a very very permissionless system to something where you have to register to actually use effectively.
Yeah, and the thing is too, like, I mean, I see Brian's point where, as you even said, Peter, that there could be a reasonable application for this, for confirming one's identity, and there's that side of it. But like you said, if it is used on a grand scale to force people to submit their identity and become de-anonymized, that's where it's problematic. And even though we don't know for sure what the intentions are behind this, I'm sorry, it's not a speculative leap to believe that there must be people, whether the ones behind the paper or not. Maybe the people behind the paper aren't thinking this, but there are people, third parties, who would be interested in using this idea to push for less anonymity on Bitcoin. And there's clearly parties out there with that incentive who would want to make Bitcoin more open and less, pseudonymous or whatever. So I think it's a real concern, at least in the potential for it. I don't know. What do you think?
And also I'll point out, like, even in the fully permissioned context, like the sort of stuff R3 works on and whatnot, I would still be very hesitant to have a system where, while the paper doesn't really point this out very clearly, the reality is, due to the way the math works, the administrators of the system can de-anonymize you. which also means that hackers could potentially de-anonymize you by hacking into those computers. Like it or not, like we've had massive leaks of very sensitive corporate data, personal data, and so on. And I think we're gradually learning as a society that this stuff's dangerous. Making that capability is dangerous. And we're not very good at, making systems that are actually secure against these kind of leaks. Better off to have a system where the math actually guarantees anonymity.
Yeah, which is kind of the whole point. Brian, did you have a comment?
Yeah, so in this system, it's a little unclear to me. So is it the people who are receiving the money or the people who are sending the money that needed to be have their identity given up?
The proposal for the mode of operation that would be for Bitcoin is that both have to. So the permission transaction, the definition of that is it's sending money from people who have registered to people who have registered. And it's mined by miners that have in turn registered. So, so everyone involved, their identity is known to the administrators of the system.
So, yeah, every party would be disclosed. Well, we're coming to break with Peter Todd and Brian Deary here in the Crypto Show. Interesting stuff about Chain Anchor. We'll talk more about it on the other side.
This is the Logos Radio Network.
For the longest time. For the longest. If you said that Bitcoin was my life, I would tell you.
All right, guys, welcome back to the Crypto Show here on this lovely Sunday, April 24th, 2016, here on Logos Radio Network, and brought to you as always, by Brave New Books, Hill Country Home Improvements, and more recently, Crypto Compare, the guys who provide us with the Bitcoin News Minute at the top of each hour every Sunday show. And we appreciate their collaboration with the Crypto Show. Speaking of appreciation,
CryptoCompare.com.
CryptoCompare.com. And speaking of appreciation, we always appreciate our guests who are willing to come on and tolerate us and enlighten our listeners.
Except for Brian Deary. He's boring.
Except for Brian Deary.
Sorry about that.
Wah, wah. No, he's not. If he was boring, we wouldn't have him on all the time. I love Brian. He's great. But we're talking with Brian Deary, Chief Scientist of Factom, and Peter Todd, Bitcoin developer extraordinaire. And we're discussing Chain Anchor. And
just a big fan of tuna as well.
Yeah, his inside joke, kind of. But we're talking about Chain Anchor, and you can learn more about it. You can Google Peter Todd Chain Anchor. You can go to Peter Todd's blog, petertodd.org, and I think it's at the top of the thing, petertodd.org/2016/ MIT Chain Anchor bribing miners to regulate Bitcoin. And he has a really good write-up on this project that was leaked. And basically what it amounts to is this proposal to de-anonymize not just miners, but then get those de-anonymized miners to only accept de-anonymized buyers and sellers of Bitcoin, which is kind of a scary notion. It kind of goes against the whole concept of Bitcoin. And as Brian Deary pointed out, there are, of course, reasonable positive applications for this, of course, potentially.
It's a big club, and you ain't in it.
God, I love him. He's so right. It is a big club, and none of us ain't in it. But yeah, it's still problematic. It still raises eyebrows and raises concerns because of the potential application to Bitcoin. And I noticed in some of the Reddit threads that I read that people were saying, oh, well, they're really talking about not Bitcoin, but some blockchain technology proposal that this would apply to that is harmless. And that may be true. But again, as I pointed out, where there's a way, there's a will. If there's maybe not the people
willing.
Exactly. Maybe not the people behind Chain Anchor, although you can't rule it out, but other people could grasp onto this and try to push it. So, Peter, one question I want to ask that you've already mentioned, it's sort of a simple part of it, but also unclear. Basically, in order to get miners to out themselves and then to force only transactions that were also de-anonymized, they would be bribed. Well, how would they be bribed, and who exactly would be doing that?
Well, so I use the word bribe in my blog post for very specific reasons, which is that, what the proposal is that the administrators of the permissioned whitelist, that people register to sign up to, they would be watching the blockchain, and every time they go see a block get created that only contains permission transactions and is also mined by miners who's themselves registered, they would essentially give them extra payment, be it on-chain or off-chain, however it happens. And I'm sorry, but the reality is there's no technical reason to do this. In my blog post, I said, it's all ones and zeros. Like, there's no reason why permission transactions can't coexist with non-permission transactions. You know, that already happens in a sense with things like chain analysis, you know, where they know the identity of some transactions, they don't know the other ones. And if you wish to only accept transactional whitelist, well, you just use the servers that are keeping track of this. You don't need miners to only do this. I mean, what is it? Do the ones and zeros of non-permission transactions have cooties? You know, it's a ridiculous concept.
I know they totally do. I think you have to did you cross your fingers or something to ward that off?
Yeah, like from a regulatory point of view, this can make a lot of sense, you know, because some regulators take views that, you know, you can't, for instance, have miners who you don't know the identity of mining your transactions. You can't pay fees to them. You might not want to be paying fees to a miner who also mines transactions that, you know, the identity isn't known. But to be honest with you, I mean, when you're talking about stuff like that, we're talking about a system that's getting so far from what Bitcoin is. Why don't you just use your own permission chain and leave us alone?
Well said.
It doesn't make much sense.
No, and you're right. Go ahead.
Well, and I'll say, like, what's interesting, of course, is now that I publish that. Now, keep in mind, like, right when I published it, their little blurb, which is the only public thing about this, said, you know, this is for permission chains as well as an overlay on Bitcoin. And the moment I published it, you know, an hour or two later, they went and changed that and removed the Bitcoin part. And then they claimed that, you know, the paper I had was a draft that's way out of date and it was changed months ago. Well, you know, it's dated February, so it's not that long ago. And they came out, you know, a couple more hours later with a revised version of the paper, which they claimed was made a couple of days ago. I mean, is it true? Is it not? I don't know.
Well,
they haven't threatened to sue you yet, have they?
Not yet. I think it'd be the dumbest thing they could possibly do. But
yeah,
well, like it's just one of those hard things because like you just can't assume good faith, particularly when, you know, I mean, I've been told privately in ways that, you know, is one person just telling me, well, I talked to this guy and, you know, he said that he wanted to invest, you know, in Chain Anchor and so on. And like, this all sounds like it's business deals getting made to actually implement this, in, you know, for real. But, you know, unless someone's going to go on the record and say leak actual emails or meeting minutes or whatever, I mean, I can't go off and start naming names. I know who's alleged to do it, but, you know, it'd be irresponsible of me to start naming names. So I put it out there and see what happens. And unfortunately, you know, when the Chain Anchor guys go out and say, well, you know, this is a draft, and particularly, like, their response had some things that, I'm sorry, were factual lies about it. You know, saying it was never about Bitcoin, which simply is not true. You know, like, why don't you just be honest and just say, yeah, we looked at the Bitcoin thing, it was a bad idea, so we stopped doing that. I mean, that would be the response I'd expect. But they didn't do that. You know, it kind of disappoints me.
So you talk about how this goes to push up this to a higher layer. Was payment codes something similar to this, where you could strongly authenticate basically a public key with yourself, and then anyone who wanted to send money to you, be it in a regulated exchange or something, would only be able to send it to a BIP32 derived seed that was specifically tied to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and a lot of these technologies can be used in this kind of environment. You know, I mean, stealth addresses actually is an example. That is something where you could use it in a very permissioned environment where you say, all right, we're going to go register our stealth addresses and, you know, we're going to give the government, say, a list of all our secrets that, you know, let you scan who paid what and so on. You could potentially reuse this tech in that very different way. Of course, when I wrote it up, I didn't write it that way. I went and wrote it saying, well, this is a way for people to pay people they know, and there's no reason to give away the scan keys.
You know, I want to reiterate something you said a couple moments ago, 2 or 3 things, actually. You can't assume good faith. That's what Peter said, verbatim. And that is such, I mean, there's no truer statement than that. And I think there's too much benefit of the doubt given a lot of times to actors in the Bitcoin space. And not that we should never do that, but under certain circumstances in particular, I think it would be deleterious to do that because there are bad actors out there. Some of the ones are more obvious, if only sort of vague and distant, you know, like the Federal Reserve or the, you know, other departments of the government, the NSA. And then some others are maybe more questionable, but not necessarily so determinedly antagonistic to Bitcoin. And for instance, the Blockchain Alliance, you know, the group of 30 that
Our
homies that are working with law enforcement, and you know, I'm not trying to
wait. We have homies that work with law enforcement. Sorry, wrong guys.
Right, wrong guys. But you know, and I'm not saying I'm not attributing bad faith to them, but it is still a questionable association. And so that's very important. And like Peter said, there's no technical or technological reason. I mean, I don't necessarily know that, but I take Peter as an expert on his word for implementing this. It's not like it's compensating for some technical deficiency or improving anything that couldn't be done in another way through this sort of, bribing, de-anonymizing system. And then, as we come to break.
And the really key thing about that is by implementing it, not only are you doing things in a suboptimal way, you're affecting people who didn't choose to be part of it. And I'm sorry, but why inconvenience people who just don't want to be part of your system?
That's true. Well, we'll talk more about that on the other side with Peter Todd and Brian Deary. Stay tuned, guys.
Did you know the majority of businesses in the U.S. are family-owned? We're not just talking mom and pop stores, but companies at the very top of the corporate ladder. I'm Dr. Catherine Albrecht, back with the top family businesses next.
Privacy is under attack. When you give up data about yourself, you'll never get it back again. And once your privacy is gone, you'll find your freedoms will start to vanish too. So protect your rights, say no to surveillance, and keep your information to yourself. Privacy, it's worth hanging on to. This message is brought to you by StartPage.com, the private search engine alternative to Google, Yahoo, and Bing. Start over with StartPage.
When it comes to business, blood and money really do mix. A whopping 8 out of 10 American businesses are family-owned. They contribute nearly 60% of the nation's economy and employ nearly 2/3 of the U.S. workforce. Many of the firms in the S&P 500 are family-controlled, and they're doing great. They're more stable, and they inspire more commitment and trust in their employees. The biggest family-owned business is, surprise, Walmart. Next comes Ford, Cargill, Koch Industries, Carlson Companies, Comcast, and News Corp. Rounding out the top 10 is the sweetest of them all, Mars. M&M's, anyone? I'm Dr. Catherine Albrecht for StartPage.com, the world's most private search engine.
Actually be kidding about chemtrails.
Looking for some truth? You found it. LogosRadioNetwork.com.
I've been walking a tightrope between fact and fiction. Been wrestling with demons in small bottle prisons. Been talking to sinners who claim to be Christian. Been shouting at leaders who claim to be listening. And the pendulum swings from the left to the right. Its momentum increases the need for the fight. Like a moment of blindness and a lifetime of sight. And somewhere in the middle.
All right, guys, welcome back to the Crypto Show. And we're talking with Peter Todd, Bitcoin developer, and Brian Deary, chief wigwam of Factom. No, I don't know. I hope that's not like racist or something. No, chief scientist of Factom.
Did you have to worry about that? Oh my God, that's pathetic.
I know. Chief scientist of Factom. And we're having a really interesting discussion. I mean, this is actually really kind of a cool topic, a little scary, but fascinating, and almost something that, you could almost predict would have happened, maybe not on the strict technical level of it, but, insofar as its theoretical implications are concerned for controlling Bitcoin, or who uses Bitcoin, or at least who gets to use it anonymously or not. It seems like one of those inevitable issues that was going to pop up. Well, in a couple of minutes, I want to let Brian raise some points of his own. But I guess, Peter, we were talking about as we were talking about this and going to break, Danny had a good question that kind of leads into a related question. And basically, would this lead to a technical fork? Or, I mean, I guess it would be an effective fork between registered and non-registered users. And then you had a really good point that this could, more than just de-anonymizing people, this could entirely exclude certain classes of people from using Bitcoin altogether, because they may not even qualify, quote unquote, to be registered. Your example being like, say I'm from North Korea. I might be a perfectly normal, non-criminal person who wants to send his capital elsewhere because of, the craziness in North Korea. But because of my the happenstance of my citizenship in this regime, I might not even qualify to be a legitimate user. Anyway, just comment on that if you would.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely true. And, similarly, I mean, this whole vision of banking the unbanked. I mean, why are people unbanked? Usually because they can't get access to, identification. And Bitcoin can bank the unbanked by letting them move money around without identification. Well, I'm sorry, but, if I'm in some village in Africa and I just don't have identity papers, there's no way I'm going to be able to register for this. And that's just the truth of it. And now my transactions might take, say, twice as long because half the miners have signed up with this and the other half are the only people who mine my transactions. Maybe I can't, use it at all. Chances, equally I might not be able to mine at all because, so much of the hashing power is agreed to sign up with this stuff. And, well, from their perspective, what's the thing they want to do? Well, get the people that signed up out of business. There's a lot of potential ugly things that can be done with this if they choose to go down these directions. As a Bitcoin developer, I think my job is to figure out, all right, where can this go and how do I prevent it from happening?
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, it could create basically Bitcoin second-class citizens. It could create Bitcoin untouchables who can't even use Bitcoin at all. And would there be
like everybody?
I know. and like you mentioned earlier, it could just totally thwart the whole purpose of Bitcoin, which is to be truly decentralized, relatively anonymous, or anonymous if you want it to be. Just, you might as well just go back to the dollar in some respects, given the worst case scenario of this situation. Well, and so, and back to that question about the technical fork, is there any issue of that happening with this? Like an actual hard fork or soft fork, or is it unrelated to that at all?
Well, this is the thing. From a technical perspective, what the system is essentially a soft fork. And I say this basically because it's adding new rules, right? The new rules being that you must register. It's a rather ridiculous soft fork, but from technically speaking, it is. And it also raises interesting questions, like can we design systems where more of the user base has to approve for a soft fork to happen? Unfortunately, that's extremely hard to do for a lot of technical reasons, but it's, it's the sort of thing people like me trying to research consensus systems would like to, know if it's possible. So it's, raises a lot of interesting questions going forward.
No, that's for sure. And, speaking of interesting questions, in just a second, I want Brian to bring up his points, but I also want to quickly go back to a point I wanted to make earlier, along with what Peter Todd said. Peter mentioned how I think it was the title of the paper basically changed from being about permission groups and Bitcoin to just permission groups, and then they sort of seem to mislead on the timing of it. To me, that's a strong indicator that something's amiss because they're basically denying the truth of the matter, that it was originally about Bitcoin as well, and they were trying to sort of ineptly cover that up. And that's, to me, a classic revelation of someone trying to mislead or conceal. So that's something to consider. It's kind of like, if I may...
Well, I'd point out that's an indication of someone trying to mislead and conceal who has no idea how PR works.
That's a good point. So, and who knows, maybe it's not even meant to mislead. They're just inept at PR. I don't know, but it's something to consider in this whole situation. Well, Brian, let's hear some of the points you have to raise.
So right now, Bitcoin space is a private good. So the miners get to decide themselves what goes in there. And so if we go back to history, so check writing, at least in the U.S., as I understand it, when you gave a merchant a check, they could not cash that in at face value. There was a fee involved. And then the Federal Reserve came in and they offered to pay the overhead for all the transaction fees. And so now today, when you write a check, it's at face value, and they get their cut through other means.
So it's basically socialized. There's no discount per individual transaction on that check. The Federal Reserve sort of socialized that cost?
Yes. Yeah. So would this be something similar where the governments are able to make it a public good of Bitcoin mining? And so through the public policy process, they're able to fund Bitcoin miners. And to prevent free rider problems, they want to have only the people who fall under their jurisdiction, who actually pay those taxes in, to be able to do this. Might that be an explanation?
Well, I'll point out that the copy of the paper that was leaked to me specifically talks about business models, including, the idea, if I remember correctly, of charging people to register. So it sounds like, this is being positioned in the context of, of a private company who would go make money off this. Obviously, government certainly could do that, but I think by the time you're talking about that level of government support, why don't they just run a couple servers in a basement somewhere guarded by orcs, who just sign blocks?
So Peter Todd confirms that the government does have orcs in their secret CIA labs.
Yes, that's going to be my next week's leaks. Yeah.
So in the
Russian genetic engineering.
Astounding.
In the Montreal conference, there was a speech given about how some possible revenue options for miners were basically pre-buying transactions, where you would basically pay a miner through side channels to on a regular basis, and they would accept your low to zero fee transactions Is that similar at all? Where you're paying a miner?
I'd point out, like, that particular idea. I mean, you don't need to know anyone's identity to do that. You can just give them some tokens saying, look, you can use each one of these when we want the transaction mined. The other thing, too, is, like, I can't really see why that makes any sense. Bitcoin already has a super low overhead, super efficient way of paying for transactions. It's called transaction fee, and you just put it on transaction, and that's that. There may be a public good problem where you might want consistency for a miner revenue in some cases, but it's hard to imagine a case where, from the user's point of view, it would be cheaper to do this weird pay in advance thing than to just pay transaction fees. Another key thing with paying in advance is only large miners can do it, which is exactly what you don't want in Bitcoin mining. You want anyone to be able to contribute their mining power. No matter how small a scale their operation is. You don't want it to be something where you need like 20% of the hashing power to even justify setting up a system like that. So anything that isn't just transaction fees actually really worries me.
Yeah, it just seems like it'll centralize things. We'll be right back with Peter Todd and Brian Deary for the last segment. Stay tuned.
Easy.
All right, guys, welcome back to the final segment of the Crypto Show here on this lovely April 24th, 2016, a Sunday. This episode brought to you as always by Brave New Books, Hill Country Home Improvements, and also Crypto Compare with the Crypto Compare News Minute at the top of each hour every Sunday. And we're talking about Chainanchor with the leaked proposal with Peter Todd, Bitcoin developer, and Dances with Bitcoin of Factum. And sorry,
I like that one. I'm going to change my business card.
Thank you. I mean, sorry, Chief Scientist of Factum, Brian Deary. Thank you very much. And Brian, you had a really good question as we were coming back from break for Peter about the cost of all this.
Yeah. So this seems to add a whole lot of overhead. If I need to pay some registration fee with some third party, and then they pass that money onto the miner, so that my transactions will be included, but it's actually to pay for transactions not to be included. So where does this money come from? I mean, it's got to come from someone who wants to censor, and they have to censor more than people who want to not be censored. It sounds like money.
That's a really interesting question, actually. I mean, it's quite hard to predict how that would go. And I think an interesting research topic is to figure out, well, how can you go make that attack as cheap as possible? And really what that comes down to is, well, how can we go harm miners who haven't decided to register? Just to name one example, I mean, we can go DOS attack, right? The miners who just aren't playing ball, which means that less transactions go through for them. And, you just have fewer miners who haven't signed up, and the cost to not sign up are higher. Similarly, you can imagine a system where, let's suppose miners don't get attacked for not signing up, but users are at a significant disadvantage because, major exchanges, say, just force you to register. And that might be enough to, by itself, just encourage enough users to register that just kind of, that the cost differential is fairly small. Because keep in mind, chances are the cost or the fees paid by unregistered transactions, from the point of view of the mining side, just, transaction fees directly on chain, they're probably going to be higher. It's a simple supply and demand thing, Any registered transaction could be mined by all miners because you can't identify them unless you have access to these special whitelists. Whereas an unregistered transaction, can only be mined by the subset of miners. So if there is a lot of demand for unregistered transaction, obviously the fees are going to go up, and they essentially have to outbid them. It may be the case that they can't successfully outbid those transactions, and this doesn't go that far. It may be the case that they find ways of harming miners who don't sign up, and this does go far. It's something I think we need to think a lot about.
Yeah, so there are multiple potential outcomes concerning how this affects miners and users, and it sounds like the most harmless outcome is that non-registered users pay higher fees, although that's still, problematic, especially if you're, say, Support African who only has a smartphone or something. And
so I have to have a license for Bitcoin now? What's up?
I know, right? And Peter brought up a good point that they can kind of leverage this proposal using Bitcoin exchanges and other third-party like applications or platforms. By getting them on board, they can then indirectly get more people on board without necessarily initially getting as many miners or what have you. And Peter, I actually have a quick question. It's kind of speculative, but we talked about, say, a North Korea not being able to qualify or to even register. Could you,
because they don't have internet or what?
well, that's the obvious reason. But
sanctions.
Even if they do, well, and
I mean,
let's
even if they do, the sanctions just don't let you. I'm just saying, even if they have the ability to access internet, there are sanctions against North Korea, against Iran, against a lot of countries, and you're just not allowed to do business with people in those countries.
No, and that's a good point, and that kind of leads me actually to my question, which is, could you perceive this? I'm not necessarily saying like the federal government created this and this is their plan, but could you conceive of this as being used as a political weapon, say by the federal government against Chinese miners? A lot, if I'm not mistaken, the majority of miners out there reside in China. Could it be a way to punish Chinese miners or get them to register or put them at a disadvantage or get them to go out of business? Could the U.S. government use that as a political device, or what's your thought on that?
I mean, I think the U.S. government wouldn't necessarily really care where the miners are as long as they know who they are. But, from the point of view of punishing anonymous miners, absolutely. I think that's a very real possibility. Equally, it's a very real possibility they'll punish miners who mine transactions and aren't registered. I know this might be, a few years down the road, but it's certainly plausible that this will happen.
Yeah, no, I mean, and again, that's another kind of aspect of it worth exploring. Well, I want to have you explain something that you brought up, and you mentioned in your paper that in your paper was well explained, but we really haven't gotten to it in the show. You talk about permission groups and the vulnerability there for exposing someone's identity. Can you explain permission groups real quick and how that works?
Yeah, so what it's sort of advertised as is this kind of mechanism where you can be added to this group and then you prove that you're part of the group. And because that proof is only that you are a member of a much bigger group, you have a degree of anonymity, right? In the sense that I'm only proving to you I'm AML compliant, but it could be any one of that, say, million people. So you don't know exactly who I am. The problem is the way the math works is, to make a long story short, the people who administer this permissions group system, if the administrators collude, they can de-anonymize anyone on the system. And the reason that works is essentially that the mechanism by which you register your identity and then get added to this cryptographic group. In the paper, they suggest that those two entities be legally, physically, administratively separate, et cetera, separate. Well, the reason is basically that if you're the guy managing the group, you know the identity is of everyone's signature. Well, obviously, if you're the person signing up people, you know who they actually are. And if you combine those two bits of data, you can de-anonymize everyone in the system.
Wow, that's crazy. So it's another way to leverage de-anonymizing. And so, just for clarification,
and keep in mind, this is undetectable. You don't know that this has happened to you. In fact, if you run the system, you don't necessarily know that this has happened.
Wow.
Say if you got hacked or something. So
how do we know it's not happening now?
Well, we know because no one's implemented it. But interestingly, this exact same tech, the actual math is already used in PCs for digital restrictions management tech used by Intel.
And could you clarify that? What do you mean?
Well, essentially, your PC, and I'm very, very oversimplifying here, but essentially, your PC is part of a permissions group, and that permissions group essentially says that it was manufactured in Intel factory and so on. And the idea is that it can make attestation saying, yes, I'm a real PC. Yes, this bit of code ran in this environment. That gets used for DRM tech. Yeah, and there's supposed to be some privacy there, but Intel does have the capability of de-anonymizing everyone on the system.
Which to me just makes me think that they know everything about everybody. Well, and so these permission groups,
that tech isn't used much, but in the future it might be.
So that's it. Just a real quick question, and then Brian has one. So the permission groups are just theoretic additional means for implementing this. So, like you said, they're not necessarily used that commonly.
Oh, I'm saying the Intel DRM stuff isn't actually used that much. But yeah, I mean, if this permissions group thing went ahead with Chainanchor, I mean, obviously everyone would be part of one.
Right. Okay. Gotcha.
So my quick reading of this, it feels like the this permission group is ring signature based or something along those lines, which you can prove that you're in a set of people, but not prove which of the people. And it's from my readings, it's really hard to remove individuals from that set after you've added them to that set.
Yes, well, that's the key thing. This isn't ring signature based; it's group signature based, which uses slightly different math And with group signatures, there is an administrator of the group, and they have the ability to add and remove people. And they can do this actually in this system at will, even without the consent of the people being removed, which is a whole other dimension to the system. I mean, with widely deployed, your funds could be frozen too.
Duh, Brian. No, I was kidding. No, fascinating stuff. We've got a little less than 2 minutes left. And so tell us again, so who is behind Chainanchor? Do we know that? I forget if we've even mentioned that or...
Well, we know the people whose names is on the paper, which is essentially two researchers from the MIT Media Lab. One of them, his affiliation is a subgroup of the MIT Media Lab, and then there's another. I'm not quite sure if he's a researcher or not, but he's with Intel. And then allegedly,
by Intel, do you mean Intel? Do you mean CIA or the microchip manufacturer?
No, the microchip manufacturer.
Oh, okay.
Maybe both. And then allegedly there are people in the Bitcoin community who are actively trying to get this implemented, but, unless we get solid evidence on that, that's an alleged.
That just sounds like another PR move to promote it and get people thinking, well, vaguely there's important people in the Bitcoin community who want it, therefore I'm going to jump on the bandwagon too. That sounds like a kind of weak PR move on their part.
Yeah, well, maybe I'm in the pocket of Chainanchor.
Dun, dun, dun. No, I doubt that. Well, Peter Todd, exposing Chainanchor and this very problematic proposal that has a lot of potentially nasty implications. It's been a wonderful discussion, and Brian Deary of Factum, chief scientist, got it right this time. Thank you for your part of the discussion and bringing up some devil's advocate and alternative perspectives on this. Guys, we appreciate it, and we'll see y'all next time.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
All right, guys, until the next episode.